there is a just a stigma sometimes around depression that you don't find um, around other kinds of issues. In fact, you go to the, you know, celebrity tabloids, it's almost like, if you're in rehab for an addiction, that's like, next to you got a new outfit almost. I mean, it's like there's nothing, it's just another story. And I'm glad that it's normalized, to get help. But it seems like, you take a lot of this different stuff, and it seems like depression kind of gets its own bad rap, in that there's kind of a shame that surrounds it for some people. There's kind of a stigma that surrounds it, which we don't find a lot of times in other maladies that people experience. And so I want to spend a few minutes on that because, it's really, really sad, because one of the things that does do is that people's depression becomes the brown bagger. In other words, they don't want to let anybody really know that they're suffering in that way. And that leads to more isolation. It leads to not getting help. I saw some statistics yesterday that just in the youth of America, the the numbers of untreated depression are just going up and up and up and up and up. And we can treat this. We know some things that we can do that help, but if people aren't talking about it, and they're not sharing it, and they're not kind of, coming out with it and admitting it, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything bad. But there's a stigma. And I think that there is a stigma, underlying it all. I think there's a human stigma that gets attached to this, like kind of, come on, snap out of it, you know, get up and get moving, change your attitude. You should be grateful. And then there's the spiritual versions of that, right? There's new age versions, there's Christian versions. I'll give you, a lot of times you don't hear Christians will say, well, if you read your Bible more, if you prayed more, if you did something more, then you wouldn't be depressed. In other words, you know what, really, this is your fault. It's kind of the hidden message in there. And it makes me want to scream. We don't do that about diabetes, do you? Well, there's an interesting little comparison, right? A lot of times depression has some significant biochemical things that are going on where certain neurotransmitters are depleted in the brain, and the brain's an organ just like the pancreas. But when somebody's insulin levels are off, which produces low energy depression, confusion, inability to concentrate, we don't blame somebody for having a reactive pancreas or a fatigued pancreas. Insulin levels off. Why do we do it with depression? And somehow it gets a stigma that you should be able to overcome this. Something's wrong with you. And a lot of times in the faith world, people say, well, if you had your spiritual act together, then you wouldn't be experiencing this. It's what they told Job. Think of the things they told Job when Job was depressed. They said, if you knew, it's like a walk through a Christian bookstore. It drives me crazy. Here's what the Job's friends told him, whom God got really mad at, right? He told the friends, you did not say what was true. And what did they say? They said, well, if you if you knew his statutes more, in other words, read your Bible more, Job. Of course, didn't have a printing press then, but same thing, right? It's your fault. If you had more faith, they told him, if you would put the sin far away from you, you wouldn't be experiencing this. If you would let your righteousness be your guard and your, sort of like position. And they blamed him. They blamed the sufferer. And a lot of times that happens to people that are depressed. And this isn't just Christians. Let me give you the New Age version of this. I was flabbergasted when this happened to me. Flabbergasted. I was doing a special project with one of the big studios here. Okay, you're not gonna believe this. My mother died. A few weeks later, my father died. A few weeks later, fortunately, Finley didn't die. Hey, girl. For those of you who can't see the screen here, Finley just showed up. She's our new Doberman, who was like tiny back in when we got her in the summer, and now she's about 6 feet tall. Anyway, she just walked in. I'll say hi to her and give her a little treat. Hey, girl. There, say hi. Whoops, dropped it. Okay, so back to my story. My mother dies. A few weeks later, my father dies. Like bam, bam. A few weeks later, my brother-in-law, who was like a brother to me, who was a Navy SEAL, was unexpectedly, suddenly killed in battle in Iraq. All of this within a period of, weeks. It was one of the hardest seasons that I ever went through for a lot of reasons. So about a month later, I'm working. I had this big project going with one of the studios. And a guy calls me from the studio and just, working on the project. And he calls me, and I had talked to him a little bit because he was working in a different department, and he was one of the head guys over there. He said, "So how's it going?" I said, "Well, it's been pretty tough. I've, had 3 deaths in the family recently." He said, "What?" And I said, "My mother died, my father died, my brother-in-law, who I was very close to, was killed." Now, here's what he said. And I said, "So, it's kind of a depressing season here." Here's what he said. He said, "You know, you really should get in touch with how you're attracting all this death into your life. Like the law of attraction, right?" Says you really start thinking about how you're attracting all this death into your life. I had heard the Christian versions of this. I never had heard the New Age versions. I've heard the secular versions, the tough guy versions, pull yourself up by your bootstraps versions. I never had heard the, like I'm attracting this. Anyway, I say all that to say, don't judge people that are depressed. And if you are depressed, reach out, talk to somebody, tell your doctor, tell your pastor, if he's a pastor or she's a pastor that actually understands. Tell somebody who's been depressed, go see a psychologist, go see a psychiatrist. Don't let the stigma do this to you. Because I've told you my story before. It started with deep depression. That's how I came to a deeper faith. And it's also how I ended up being a psychologist. But it's deep depression, really bad. So let's get rid of this stigma.